When I arrived in London, I had £12 in my pocket. I was a young teenager who had just traveled from Afghanistan without any family. My first experience of the United Kingdom involved going through an extensive immigration process at Heathrow Airport. I had to spend time in detention there before I was being released. At my first screening checkup, my GP told me I was suffering from acute depression and stress. He advised that I go and join a gym. I told him I didn't have money, and I didn't know anybody who would cover the gym membership fee for me. This is how I looked on the day I saw London for the first time. I paid for this travel card from the £12 in my pocket. For the next 2 years, I lived on less than £50 a week while trying to adjust to a new life in the United Kingdom. Because I had no paperwork to prove my level of education, the college put me through rigorous tests before letting me into an A-levels course on probationary basis. This was to be expected of the UK education system, not to trust a child with my background. I was born in Afghanistan into an academic, intellectual family, but I went to school only for 1 year before the Civil War broke out in 1992. During the chaos of civil war, I attended a dysfunctional school, but as the Taliban took over the country, I joined a religious seminary, so-called madrasa. You see, during the time when the Taliban were in power, for many families, they had to choose between sending their children to a broken education system or to madrasas where at least the clerics turned up to teach. The Taliban regime was under international sanctions, so the country virtually had no economy. So over time, for many people, the madrasas replaced the schools for their children. Unfortunately, the curriculum and the worldview presented in these madrasas were quite an extremist one. Later, my family was forced to go to Pakistan as refugees, where I spent time for a while. I went to a refugee school there, which was effectively a house that was rented with improvised classrooms. It wasn't even recognized as a school by the authorities. That's me, standing next to one of my teachers after a student conference. I had helped organize that conference. We would do normal gatherings of young people doing poetry reading, article reading, and that sort of stuff. So my early childhood, and my childhood generally, was filled with trauma and uncertainty. I was born into an intellectual family, yes. I was born into a big family. Believe me when I say I have over 50 first cousins. But I'm barely in touch with most of them. I had such a big family that my uncles had a volleyball team. Can you believe that? And they were the local champions as well. It's pretty famous. Nevertheless, I still suffered from loneliness and trauma because there was war around me and because I had to work as a child. I worked as a child to support my family. I sold eggs, yogurt, kerosene oil, and so forth at a vending booth in eastern Afghanistan. But I barely made enough money to ever buy a book. I couldn't afford the fees for the local English language classes that weren't even expensive. And while all of this poverty was around me, I also had to deal with the trauma of, on a daily basis, trying to keep safe from the harm of armed militia who would be out on the street, on the same streets where I would be selling stuff in the vending booth. But you might ask, why am I telling you all of this story? What's the point? Why am I here standing on this platform speaking to this wonderful audience? My early childhood and my childhood experiences mean that I'm very passionate about young people. In fact, I plan to study PhD this year at the University of Cambridge, where I hope my research will explore the relationship between social media and identity formation among British Muslim young people. I work at one of the most respected research institutions in the world. I've met presidents abroad. I've advised governments, institutions, and high-ranking officials. I've met our own Prime Minister in the UK. That's a recent visit to the Downing Street. But my passion remains at the grassroots level with the young people. I'm a proud volunteer wherever I go. Unfortunately, young people are increasingly unhappy, and the picture doesn't change wherever we look in the world. In the country that I was born, the government says 75% of women and 59% of men are suffering from mental health-related issues. Now, Afghanistan is a country of 32 million or so, made up of over 60% people under the age of 25. That's a significant number of young people living with mental health-related issues. The story doesn't change when we look in the UK as well. It's similar. Official statistics here show that 21% of people between the age of 16 to 24, they suffer from anxiety and stress. So you can say we have a crisis of emotions of young people globally. Poverty, conflict, and the stresses of daily life are among the major factors causing mental health-related problems among young people. In the UK, the story is the same as well. The pressures of modern life, loneliness, and the pursuit of unrealistic economic goals are some of the major factors that are causing stress and anxiety for young people. My own research and work with the young people show to me that while the technology has broken so many barriers for young people, that it still remains open as a channel for young people to be stressed through negative influences. As our services, our social services, our health services, our education service struggles with the demands put on them, as sometimes it takes up to 10 years for a young person in this country to get help with emotional support. You might ask, what should we do as society? What is it that we could do as individuals? Something actionable, simple, let's do it. What can we do? Well, that's why I'm here on this platform today, hoping to share something like that with you. And it's this. In your locality, at your workplace, on your social media, but more importantly at home, be a positive influencer to a young person. What do I mean by that? Give a few minutes of your time. Give any moment of your time, no matter how briefly, to a young person. Help them write a personal statement. Buy them a coffee if they want to meet and just have a chat. Encourage them to do sports. Listen to them when they're going through emotional crisis and confusion. More importantly than anything, don't label young people. I'm in front of you. I shouldn't be here. I had a future that was destined to failure. I had a potential future filled with hate. I went through an extremist curriculum. I was a Taliban madrasa recruit. I had a very negative view of the people with other belief systems, and particularly those without any belief systems. My perceptions of the women's role in society were profoundly negative. And many years ago, as a very young person, I would have had difficulty engaging with people like yourselves. But I'm one of the lucky ones. I was able to get out of the trapped mindset, but unfortunately it carries on for many young people. Through my research, for example, especially around radicalization and as I look at the Taliban movement and movements alike. It's clear to me, no question, the recruitment of young people to a life of alienation and radicalization has so much to do with negative influencers. It has a lot less to do with any kind of ideological devotion, even if that happens later on. So the need for positive influencers is immense. You can't underestimate that. When I'm asked, how did you, from a child selling yogurt, eggs, kerosene oil, end up with as a young man having double degrees from prestigious British universities? How did you, as a child studying at a madrasa with a potentially extremist outlook of life and everything, end up as a qualified researcher writing about global issues, advising governments and institutions? My answer is simple. It was the positive influencers in my life. I did not get any help that I needed from either social services, health services, or educational services. In the UK, the added pressure on me was that I had to live with an oppression of my identity for so many years. I could only be me in certain circumstances. And those circumstances were often in isolation and loneliness. I still remember walking into a bank trying to open a bank account, and I was told, you're an asylum seeker, you can't open a bank account. So I had to deal with that. I'd never had long-term mentors. But it was a number of positive influencers around me that helped me steer my life where it is today. It was my dad's absolutely unconditional nurturing, making sure that as I pumped kerosene oil into household lanterns, that I did not feel inferiority while looking at my peers playing on the playground being children. It was the elderly neighbor who would come in front of the little vending booth, sit with me. He had weak eyesight. He couldn't see me very well. But he would teach me Persian poetry just to help me a little bit to get through the war. No heroes from outside came to change my mind. It was the ordinary, heroic Afghan women with whom I worked as volunteer at a local health organization that challenged my negative perceptions about women. It was my first English language teacher in London who didn't know me for long, but believed in me. She wrote a letter of support to help me get into A-levels. My politics lecturer at college who bought me a black Marks and Spencer trouser, so when I turned up on my first day of work at a law firm, that I didn't feel embarrassed wearing jeans. I'm not here to give you a victim narrative about myself or about young people. That's not my purpose. But I want you to remember my story. I want you to remember that there are countless number of young people out there who crave the positive voice that I was lucky to get. But I also challenge you. Reach out to young people who may not be from your background, who may not even share your convictions and values, who may not be from your locality. It's simple. You can. At the end of the day, we can analyze and generalize as much as we like to. The truth is that the emotional well-being of our young people depends on who and what affects their thoughts. Our young people are our future. Invest in your future. Be a positive influencer to a young person. Thank you.